So for Laity Sunday, there was a handful of us that were asked to speak and talk about kind of message of laity and our personal testimony. I'm going to start with my personal testimony, and it's going to kind of work into how I serve and being in the laity here at Coburn. So I was born into this church and have attended here for the majority of my life. My immediate and extended family are all Christians, so I never really questioned my faith and was always pretty much a given. However, when I moved to college in Columbus to attend the Ohio State University, I was faced for the first time with having to intentionally decide to find a church and find a community of believers in a new city. So I didn't do either of those things. And when I come home, my mother would regularly ask me if I'd found a church yet, and I'd emphasize how busy I was with my studies and that I would get to it. So I don't have any crazy college stories that I radically drifted away from a Christian life. I pursued my studies, but didn't make much time for anything else. By the end of my freshman year, I was fairly disillusioned with college. For the summer, I returned to Zanesville and pursued an internship here, and was involved at Coburn, but soon returned to Columbus. To no credit of my own, I was invited by a classmate to attend a church service on OSU's campus. I agreed as I knew I needed to get involved in something other than just my studies. I quickly became a part of this church, and for the first time, I was in a church where there was enough people my age that I had a whole group of Christian men to be in community with. A group that we could lean on, learn from each other, and support each other. And this time was probably the time that my faith grew the most. Through this time, I struggled through learning how to give God my worries and frustrations, which would come often, learning to be on your own in a new city and at a college. But one of the biggest challenges was to not put my identity into my works, even as I became involved with this church and would serve there. Which is kind of counterintuitive to say on Laity Sunday that was my struggle, was not putting my identity in those works. But much of my identity was built on what I could do. The men of my family are often known as the ones who always are working. And really in my family, manual labor is what we do for fun. And we're pretty bad at sitting still or doing anything that we don't feel is productive. But in this church, from a young age, my family has found many ways to serve. As I grew up, I was often here with Dad or Grandpa doing some sort of project. Currently, I'm one of the trustee co-chairs on the leadership board and the primary sound tech. So when I began attending church at OSU, I was now in a church that I was not serving in any capacity. I was attending worship, and I was in a small group. It was an important reset that I had to take to heart, and that my faith came before my works, and the works would then come out of that faith. This was a new season of life for me that, like I said, fostered a lot of growth in my faith, and I try to think back on that time often. Even now that I'm serving in many capacities here, that I see that I need to keep that in mind, that that's not my identity. The way I serve will change as the years progress. In about a year, my term on the leadership board will expire, and that'll change how I serve here. I also try to think about the day when it comes that there's things that I'll no longer be able to physically do. I know I'm young, and that's hopefully a long way off. But I hope that my faith leads me to ways I can continue to serve, and that I don't put my identity in specific ways that I serve. And I hope that I realize that there are continued ways to serve as seasons of life change. One area in particular that I believe myself and I urge everyone here to consider is how can you serve to create Christian community? As Pastor Mark spoke earlier today, that with an example of the circuit riders, there were small groups that were led by the laity. Most of the time in the church was led by the laity. And in this age, especially my generation and social media, where it seems everyone's connected, but there's not real community. So I challenge you, and something that I'm trying to challenge myself. Perhaps you volunteer to host a small group, open your home to gather with them. Maybe do something that you enjoy. Maybe you want to start, say, a bowling group, and that's something that fun, and you can invite someone to that because it's something that's an easier ask than asking them to come to a church service. So, but there is one thing that I guarantee you. There'll be times it won't be easy. Maybe you create that small group and you're asked questions about the Bible that you stumble over. Maybe you create that bowling group and no one shows up the first week. You have to decide that there's a higher reason that you're going to do this and pray about it. That's something that, personally, I often have to remind myself why I'm doing something. It's very easy to come here and do what we have volunteered to do, but to continue to ask for God's guidance. Now, God isn't going to spell out exactly how he wants you to serve or how he wants you to do it, but as you do it, he'll guide you. So, there's something here for everyone, no matter your age, your experience, or your ability. So, I challenge all of you and myself, let's come together as the church and find new and old ways to serve the Lord. Thank you.
Would those helping with the offering this morning come forward? It is because of God's many blessings that we have the opportunity to give back.